Jillian here with Citizen J Podcast. On today's episode, I have Alan Wang, CEO of KC HiLiTES. Let's get to it. Alan, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We have had kind of an interesting relationship. I don't think I ever foresaw having a CEO of a company. That title, in my mind, kind of seems bigger than life. But I think what I love about our relationship is, and I think this is something you give off, I don't ever feel like you're bigger than life when I'm having a conversation with you. And that theme for our relationship has been something that I think I really treasure with you.
Yeah, like I think our relationship started and has blossomed because, you know, I tend to want to just break things down to basic things, which is we are two humans, you know, having a conversation, right, like now. And when I do that, I think things in life get easier. And I think that's really the source of me. For a long time, you know, a lot of people call me like Switzerland. Why? Because I'm always like looking at different perspectives and trying to understand different people's beliefs and truths. And what we've really brought to KC is a renewed sense of identity, of who we are, our soul, and it's okay to be who we are. It's okay to embrace our past, but then forge into the future with things that some of the things we don't know until we know.
Right.
And that's kind of innovation and entrepreneurship, you know? You can profoundly have an impact on the result or the process to that result. But it all starts with just being us.
Right.
And that's been a lot of the journey for KC, which is just being KC and being proud of doing that.
Yeah.
But it's also understanding like what that is and being able to articulate what that is.
Right.
And I'm doing that at a personal level too.
I think, and you kind of touched on it a little bit there, you focus on the individual. At your core, I see you like trying to kind of dissect, not in a creepy way, but like understand the person you're talking to so that you can better serve them. I've always seen that as a trait or a tool that you use in the way you communicate. Like, I think we need more of that. We only connect when we partake in those types of experiences. You just focus on the individual. I have never seen, though, a company function the way yours does. I have never wanted to be a part of in any way. Like with you guys, it's like, however I can show up and be there, like I'm in. Whatever you want me to do, I'm in. And that is simply because I feel safe with you guys, but I also just love the environment that you've created. It's just a beautiful thing to be a part of this company. Did that come naturally that you want to communicate with with people that way, or did it come naturally that was important to you, or was that something you learned?
I think all of the above.
Okay.
I think my desire to really understand someone comes from as I process my insecurities, if I'm gonna be at my best, you know, just in a conversation, your best is really just like focus and make the person feel like welcome, safe, and also engaged, right? It comes back to like just understanding them, you know, and truly understanding them. Because I remember a point in my life where my beliefs were my job is my identity, or what I've accomplished is my identity, and my actions were always showing up like, oh, like how much do I make, or how, you know, what car do I, you know, like these things that then feed back to my identity, you know. But what I realized is that was the only person that thought that was me. Everyone else could give a shit about what the fuck I did, you know? And so I began to realize through some feedback, whether it was like previous significant others or my own learning and like seeing what was resulting from that, that I began to start making a shift to like, oh, like I could just be me and I just want to be focused on like, not like, what do you do? Where do you live? Like, you know, but it's like the curious things about
who are you?
Yeah, like how did you get here? You know?
Right.
And that, you know, age is a part of that, but I think it's life. But it does come from within. But my point is still coming back to the individual, welcoming people, understanding who they really are, making them feel accepted, which is a huge insecurity of mine of worrying about not being accepted. Okay. These are all things I try to like give the people around me. From my brothers, you know, to my friends, to new people that I see, that I almost, you know, feels like I might be that person, and so I want to make them feel welcome, in short, right? So it's a lot of my insecurities I've turned into like, well, how do people want to be treated? I want to try to do that for other people, you know? I think the pulse out in society right now, as it relates to companies, is I heard a guest speaker talk about marketing digitally, right? Digitally marketing. Right. And he brought up the point that the amount of time that we spend marketing to customers, live chat, branding, product, you know, pages, you know, A/B testing, this and that, how much do we spend on that with our employees and marketing to them? I mean, we are like literally doing everything we can to engage customers, right? Everything. And we do very little, I think, for ourselves, but also for the people that work for us. Right. They need to be marketed to. They needed even, you know, new onboardees or recruiting. Right. And so this idea that every person really matters is important. Right. The quality of relationships is a huge core value. Absolutely. To me and KC. And I think, I mean, I know I've said this to you before, and I interact at different levels with a lot of companies within our off-road space, and there is no company that is doing what you guys are doing. All these words, authenticity and stuff, you just really embody that. I don't think I've seen a company take those, you know, claim those characteristics and then actually produce like visuals for it, where I'm like, wow, I don't think I've ever seen that in play at this level. So I love that. It makes working with you guys like not work. It's fun. If I get the opportunity to do that, like I'm in. Like I wanna hang out. But I guess the position you're in now, head of KC HiLiTES, one of the top performing companies in the industry. I mean, where does that story start? How did you fall into this position? How long do we have today? But it's a long story and quite the adventure. So. Okay. So Pete is the original founder of KC, and him and my dad met through mutual contacts in the aftermarket industry. Okay. So my dad at the time was supplying components and product to SEMA members, right? Okay. In the industry. Yeah. And so word of mouth, those companies introduced Pete to my dad. Okay. At the time, Pete was facing some challenges in his supply chain with regard to bulbs and metal housings and light housings and whatnot. Right. And so he was looking for options, and my dad came highly recommended because of his quality of relationships with the other customers that he had been dealing with. And so that's kind of how they built a relationship. Absolutely. My role really started with KC when I joined my dad, about the time that Michael bought the business from his dad. Okay. And in 2014-15, we built a really great relationship, and there was a point in time where it made sense, and Michael was open to that, right? Someone who he trusted and felt could really take the business to the next level across the board, and we were able to purchase KC from him over a few years from 14. Okay. So KC's owned by my dad, Andy, my brother, and myself, and Michael, as Pete is very protective of the brand. Okay. It is something they not only created, but put so many years of their blood, sweat, stress, tears, everything into. And they're highly protective of the brand as best they can without being overly involved when it's not necessarily their investment anymore. Right. But Michael gives us advice. I call him all the time for brand advice, trademark advice, all sorts of stuff, and Pete too. Is there anything that you'd be willing to share, like as like some pinnacle piece of advice that came down, has stayed with you till now? There are. I mean, there's probably like a billion things. One of the things I think is still very relevant is kind of on the vein of what we've discussed about this quality of relationship that we have. And I think it comes back to simply put, if you want something from someone, the relationship needs to be good, because it's the only time that people will make sacrifices for you or for the situation, right? And that is our core value at KC now, is the quality of relationships drives the quality of results.
All right, so I mean, I guess I'll put it out there. I feel like people know this, but it's a family-run business. So dad, you have, a father-son relationship with your dad, but you also work with your dad. You're a business partner with your dad. Like, what's that dynamic like? Because I can only imagine.
Yeah, I mean, it's, we have a lot of disagreements.
Okay.
I mean, the fact is he's older than me. I won't disclose his age, but he's much older than me, right? And so, of course, we're gonna have that. But, I think it comes back to like, I think at some point I started taking ownership over what's actually going on, versus being a victim to the situation. And what that really means specifically is, an example would be, my dad would one time said to me, we were having a discussion about something to do with KC, and he said to me, the difference between you and I, Alan, is that you let people walk all over you, and I don't. And I think that the old me interpret that as I'm not good enough, really, right? That I'm wrong and that I'm a pushover. The reality of it is that maybe I am. But when I took ownership of that and finally got to a point where I was actually asking why I was feeling what I was feeling, and why would he say this to me? I mean, he's a dad, he loves me. Like, why? And I've never known my dad to actually have an ego. Like, I don't, so I was conscious enough to actually stop to ask myself, why would my dad say that to me, and why am I feeling this way? And I think what I realized was that he's just trying to protect me. And I think he was also in a state where, in order to get through to me, he was using a triggered state, which what I mean by that is like, our brains go through this state where it's like, we're emotional. If we're emotional, we make brash decisions. Now, sometimes they may work out, but sometimes they don't, And so when the old me would just keep digesting that as like, I'm not doing it right. This is a negative thing, like those thoughts would come to me. And when I had the epiphany, it was like, holy shit, this is how he shows his love. This is how he's just trying to make me better, right? And it's a shift in mentality, and then the words mean different things.
Right.
And then I realized I can just show up and say, Dad, what you just said really hurts me because I work hard. And I also realized that as much as I haven't told you that I try to be good enough for you, that I'm trying to be good enough for you. And when you say that way and you come at me that way, it really hurts me.
Right.
And it doesn't make me want to do more of what you're saying, but actually the opposite.
Right.
And also, this is why I'm behaving the way I am. And I'm much more calmer now, but when I was saying it, I was calmer than what I used to do, which was probably lash out at him and try to convince him that I'm not a pushover, and that I'm not too nice or whatnot. But when I did that, which was really hold up a mirror to him and kindly draw a boundary, which is, I don't want to be treated this way because it doesn't feel good and you're hurting me, when I'm already trying very hard. It literally changed everything for me, first and foremost, because like a lot of people say, it kind of a big weight is lifted from your shoulders that you're carrying, or your chest. And I felt free. I felt like, wow, like I could be kind and I can call him out on how it's affecting me and get my point across that it's okay to be me, right? And that was a huge turning point in our relationship. And I would say that since then, which was about, let's say 2-3 years ago, he will actually say when I get upset that I'm just giving you advice and that, you're running the show or you're making decisions and it's just advice. And then I feel guilt. And then I say sorry.
But he's also learned how to communicate with you.
Better than I am.
Yeah.
Better than I am. And I'm working on myself more than he is every day with regard to mindset, right? And so it's huge because it's changed us.
Yeah.
And that kind of change is profound.
Right.
And what's interesting about that is at KC, one of the foundations for quality relationships comes back to being impeccable and very responsible with the use of your words and also receiving words, which is something that I really try to work on. And it's complicated. I mean, people are people and they have emotions and they are commingled with the business. And so at the end of the day, if you want something, you know, that quality of relationship will ultimately drive the result and the quality of that result. So I think for people out there, it's like asking the question, how much are you willing to sacrifice for a situation?
Because at the end of the day, like, this company can disappear and that's still your dad. That relationship still has some a priority in your life.
Yes.
Because I think you would never sacrifice that relationship for success. I mean, at least I think I know you well enough. Like, that's important to you. So that there has been growth within the community or within the company that you guys are working at together. It's a beautiful marriage of the two.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, and it took a long time to even get there. And I think that every single good and challenging moment led up to that point where a human, me or him, is capable of rewriting our own code, if you will, to perpetuate what we, you know. And what you brought up about that is very powerful because the idea that the company could not be here, but he's still my dad, is my philosophy on the company. An employee could leave a company, but what we've given them so that they can make themselves a better person is infinitely more important than, you know, the work that they accomplish here necessarily. And I think giving that to people is important because there's no greater purpose than their own selfish needs.
Right.
And the thing is, selfishness doesn't have to be bad. I think that's just part of maybe society.
Or there are characteristics that we would deem selfish that aren't a negative thing, for sure.
And for them to have purpose beyond the company and you're a part of that is priceless. I mean, really is, you know. So.
For sure, right.
But that has led literally to the possibility that a torch could be passed between families that have been working together and ultimately to us as the third generation of family within Casey's family that is responsible for carrying this torch, right?
Well, and you don't just say these things because obviously I could hear everyone being like, yeah, those are good principles. Like I want to be like that. But I have you telling even the history story, it's you've been living this or trying to, and you only by having those failures and experiencing it with different people, difficult people that aren't gonna fit the mold right away, and you're like, oh, I haven't seen this equation before. How do we? But being consistent every time over years, I'm sure, of these relationships, that tool bag becomes really like, okay, I can do this now. I can kind of handle anybody. I think it's consistency. That mindset has been consistent for you.
It looks like that.
Well,
right. And then in the background, it's consistent. I mean, as humans, we gravitate towards everything that we know that we shouldn't do. Because if you made like a T, and I talk about this a lot in our leadership, it's like you draw a hangman T and you list all the things. So the goal is like, I'm gonna work, I'm gonna get healthy. You list all the things, right? And then you list all the things that you need to do, and then you list all the things that you shouldn't do that you're doing.
Right.
Which one do we gravitate towards?
Right.
Which one do we regress to? Always, why? Because that's how our brains are designed, you know, and we're learning more about how the brain processes things. And I think in the military, they train a lot about this because in order for a person to actually perform in a stressful situation, they have to practice, right? And sometimes that's practicing mind, sometimes that's practicing physically, but they are really trying to understand how the body works. And I think that's, to me, what I believe is right now, we've come to a point where through technology and then through the access of information, and through we're not in a time of Game of Thrones anymore, although in parts of the world seemingly we might be. We need to reboot the operating system that we're running. Right. And the question is how. Everyone's different, you know. But my point is that it is inconsistent, actually. It just looks consistent. And another good example, I think, of quality relationships is, kind of coming back to like this arc of from Pete to Michael to us, what that looks like as a family, right? Because if a result's not happening, meaning KC was in, a worser shape than it is now, what we're willing to do in those moments in struggle, I think the struggle is hard, But what we're willing to do is much easier, because we either don't have enough food or people are dying. You are willing to come together as a group to go forward.
Right.
It's when you get to the top of the hill or the top of the accomplishment that all the other stuff that we're carrying, either the baggage and stuff, starts seeping in.
Right.
And then for family businesses, that's a hard thing. But how can we transform? And for me, I've had to look inside a lot in terms of what is the quality of relationship with my dad and my brother. Does that have an impact on the result that I want? Which is, if KC has moved from reactionary state to a growth state, right? And I'm not seeing the results because we're fighting a lot, or people are wanting to be right versus finding a solution, right? If I'm not getting that, what's the root cause, right? And so, one example would be, I think we reached a point, and it was really about me being right, about my way and how I saw them showing up. Like, I really genuinely believed I was right. That my dad, and a lot of it's like understanding your own story. And through my own story, I've kind of traced it back naturally to, for my dad, he had a traumatic experience in business, which was with his brother. And so his belief was that if my sons as brothers can't work together, their relationship will be destroyed, because that's what happened to him for whatever reasons, right? And so he was projecting that onto me. And what that looked like to me, which my theme was, I'm already not good enough for him, which I actually didn't even know that, because I was pretty confident in general. But at the root of it, I wasn't good. I didn't feel good enough. I didn't even know this, right? But when he would take my brother's side, because he was trying to protect him, almost like Andy was him and I'm the older brother, right? And look, this could be all a narrative. This could be all a story. But the fact is, once I understood a little bit more of that, I developed some understanding and empathy, for myself, in that, wait a second, I am good enough. Like, why am I reacting this way that I have to prove that I'm right? Why are these words coming out of my mouth when I would never say these things to my leadership team or to Jillian, right? Why would I act differently with my dad? Obviously, I'm his son. Obviously, we have history, but why, you know? And it came back to like, wow, my quality of relationship with my dad isn't as good as I thought it was.
Right.
We were close, but there's still gaps. And as a result of that fog of war, but of not understanding how I felt and how he felt and why, it's going to be stalemate. And for KC, what that means that, at some point, either you sell the business and you go separate ways, or I buy the business, or him and Andy buy the, and we got to that point, But again, quality of relationship drives the results. If the results aren't there, sometimes it's the quality of relationship you have with yourself that you don't even know that you don't know,
Right.
And sometimes it's with someone else.
I think I could listen to you all day. I just kind of like zoned out. I was like, oh man, this is what I love. I love hearing people, and I think we've discussed this, privately, with like kind of not coming of age, but as we've gotten older, there's been a lot of introspective dissection of who we are as an individual. And I think we've exchanged that it's been profound to realize like how flawed you are, and not in I'm a terrible person and I can't do anything, but let's be real, let's break this down. If I really want to be successful with these things, I really have to be really honest with who I am. And that includes the parts I would really rather not talk about and really rather not deal with. But as I've gotten older, I've found if those things that I'm not dealing with because they're uncomfortable or they're really, I don't want people to know that that's part of my personality. I present so well. If I don't deal with those, or at least acknowledge that those are a part of my makeup and those will show up in certain things.
Sure.
If I don't acknowledge those, I have no tools, no way to deal with that.
Right.
And then I am a slave to this thing I haven't dealt with inside me.
Right.
And the power, you kind of take back some more power by exposing these things to the light and being like, okay, and whether that means, hey, I need help, I need to go, talk to somebody else.
Sure.
Or, I need to voice this with my family and go, okay, I'm going to acknowledge that I do this thing. I just think that process is not talked about in our society, and especially I feel like even more so with the social media thing, which is maybe a little bit more my narrative with it, because I live in a society where what I am is so important and it needs to be perfect. and maybe in business it's similar, like, at a certain position in business, well, you need to present in a powerful, strong way. I don't know, it's just been a fun part of getting older that I'm like, oh, no, acknowledging the bad stuff is a good thing.
Right.
Let's get through that. I guess a big thing for me is I'm trying to apologize quicker. I know I have things in me that I snap, I'm lashing out at somebody because I'm emotional, and I have these things in me, and my pride wants to be like, well, no, but I'm kind of right. Maybe I shouldn't have yelled, but I was kind of right. So I'm gonna let it go.
So let's unpack that a little bit. I mean,
let's not.
Like,
no.
where do you think, what drives you to not want to be right, I guess? Because ultimately it seems like your ego is protecting you, right? So it's like you're stating a fact, or you have a belief, and when there's a conflict, it's like you gravitate towards defending yourself, right? So it's like, the question is why? You don't have to answer now. Take time.
Therapy with Alan Wang.
We can sit in my conference room and talk more. But it's like, I've asked myself that more so recently, in some of the most challenging times. Sometimes I'm conflicted. Sometimes I'm seeing those things as flaws, And one thing I think I'm learning through therapy and through just life is just that some of those things that we label as bad aren't even bad. They're fucking normal, And if it's normal, then why can't you be authentic with it? Or why, Well, that's also one reason why you're successful and I'm one big Wang, right? so I also want to caveat that it's also depending on the context, and I could give a shit about perfection, and that. But in another context of KC, I mean, I'm sure there are people who are bigger control freaks than I am, but I do have certain things that I want to be involved in, and I see a vision for it.
Right.
But even that I'm trying to let go, and it's an evolution of understanding myself, and also what the business needs, and what sanity the people around me need in this next phase of the business, right? But it's like, why? Why do we do those things? Where does that come from? Who do we learn that from? Mom and dad. But like, where does that come from? But that's part of the journey.
Well, I think it's another evolution for me, though, because I know at my core, or at least in my youth, or in those initial mindsets that I've had, life was very black and white for me. So when I am off center and emotional, and now just no longer really thinking about things, I'm just leaning into the feeling. Which obviously, being a feeling, highly emotive person has allowed me to do a lot of things. I'm very grateful for that. But I also know when off center, it's gnarly. And I also, with that, when I become emotional, it's one or the other. And if this is right, well, this is wrong.
Yeah.
And so I feel very righteous in my attack because I am locked in on these two principles. And I think as you get older, well, yes, I still think there is right and wrong, and we need those two principles to be solid. Things are not black and white when you're speaking to another human being, because I cannot impart, well, this is the only way to go.
Right.
I don't know their experience nor their perspective or really what that person's feeling. I can think I know what they're feeling, and I can tell them how they need to be, but that's incredibly unfair for me to do that to somebody. So I think it's become a lesson in taking a breath. So I'm back to the apologizing. When I hear that, I really try to you need to swallow that and apologize. Like, you were wrong. That was a bad reaction. You may be right, but that was not how you talk to somebody. And then also taking the step of I need to put myself in their position. What's going on with them? I have no idea what's going on. I just have this, and usually it's a message on Instagram, a text, these things that have no human emotion, no ability to actually know what the person is telling you.
Yeah.
So I think that's been something that's more recent and again, so that process, you see that makes you a kinder person, more empathetic, you can communicate better. Why are you gonna yell at somebody? We know that doesn't do anything, but we speak to somebody, communicate, and then come to an understanding and move forward together. There's so much more power in that.
Way more power than the other one, which
I'm gonna force you to do this.
I mean, you bring up a lot of great, I think, points there, and the one that I think resonates with me the most is more the idea of how I show up. which relates to like my biggest belief. One of the biggest beliefs I have is like, I need to create the best version of myself. And if I can do that, then I can create the best versions of family, my family, the companies that we run, you know, the communities that we affect, and the industries that we work in, you know. But it starts with creating the best version of myself, which what I heard from you is acknowledging and being aware of something that is an action that you do, which is might be defensiveness, or I need to be right, or I think for me actually, I do the same thing. Is when I feel very strongly about something, I'm like bipolar about it. You know, it's like boom, like I'm gonna buy a foreigner and like make it Frankenstein, and I'm gonna go overlanding like every day, you know, or whatever. I'm like very crazy about the idea, right?
Right.
Or if I'm in a conversation, I found myself to be very dysregulated in how I'm handling myself. But showing up is a big deal, because in what I heard you say was when you show up a certain way, you're more able to either, if you're trying to convince someone, you can do that better, right? Than if you were like coming in guns blazing and saying, I'm right, you're wrong, see ya, bye, what, you know?
Right.
Or confrontational, and I think that's a huge thing to learn, over, whether it's our age or through our experiences, work, personal, to get to that point that you can be self-aware, catch yourself, and then develop habits that actually support having a conversation, no matter how confrontational or how strong the beliefs or truths are to us. That's pretty cool, you know? And I'm still learning about that, because
oh gosh, yeah.
You mentioned black and white, and there's a lot of gray area. And I learned that in an example that was given to me where, you know, if I asked you, what does money mean to you?
You want my answer?
Yeah. What does money mean to you? What is money?
I think money allows for, I mean, this is like freedom in a sense. It's a tool to accomplish activity, to pursue things. I think that I see it as it is definitely a necessary tool to get where I need to be.
So freedom, opportunity, you know, independence. So what I would invite everyone to ask their kids is, what does money mean to you? 2-year-old, 3, the younger the better. Before they've gotten a ton of programming from you about what money means and everyone around them, ask them what money means. And what you'll find is the answer is not the same as yours.
Yeah.
Right? So who's right? It's a belief. Right? And so when when that was said to me, I'm like, oh man, that makes sense. And so that might actually vary in the room. Like if I asked you, or I asked my dad, or I asked people at work, I mean, there's gonna be some common ground, but I think you'll find that there's a lot of different beliefs. So if we show up in a way that we're trying to be right or wrong, even if we wanna teach a lesson, I mean, Yoda never taught a lesson by fucking telling, you know, anyone that you gotta do this, you gotta do that. I mean, seemingly he sits back and is very calm, even when someone's turning to the dark side, and you're like, dude, fucking slap him, you know, or whatever. And I actually I use this analogy with my team is I genuinely feel I'm like Obi-Wan right now, because I feel like there has been some enlightenment, but I'm still like Obi-Wan trying to change Luke Skywalker, right? And you will never fucking change them.
Yep.
And so it's like, it is a lot of gray area, and there'll be people out there that disagree, where it's like, no, this is.
Well, and that's not your job.
It's not
my job to, like, I've taken this role on where I'm going to make you see the light, and it's like, whoa, that's not your job in their life to do that.
And I love that point. So the first one, to close it up, it was just like this concept that, you know, we try to control, right? But beliefs are beliefs, and look, agree or disagree. For me, I'm trying to show up as my best version. Therefore, I am also trying to take a step back and not judge as quickly, because I don't know how to judge gray area of truth, someone else's truth being right or wrong, or my truth being right or wrong sometimes. So taking a step back, chilling out a little bit, then, you know, assessing, creating space, and then, you know, showing up in the best way possible to articulate, well, first make someone feel heard, because I mean, we all want to feel heard. And I think that for me, actually, part of it is like, if I grew up not being heard, then I might actually, like, I think I act like maybe you do, which is I just am aggro about this, you know, because I don't feel like I'm being heard. So I'm gonna punch you in the face.
I didn't realize how similar we were until this moment.
We're all human. Yeah, we're human. We have a lot of similarities.
I guess like what we said though is like we're a lot more similar. We've said that before,
yeah.
and I think we like to think that like, well, no, this is a me problem, or I have this special skill to do. I have the wisdom.
Right.
I have the wisdom to impart this to you.
Right.
And it's like the reality is like, no, we're all very similar.
Well, I think more than we even know.
Right. Probably more than we'd like to admit.
Or like to admit.
Yeah, we think we're so individualistic on that. This is going to be a weird question. But someone recently told me that, and I'm speaking of like how to create creativity or how to cultivate that in your mind. Benjamin Franklin, I think this is so weird, but sat outside every day naked. And I want to say for like 30 minutes or something like that. Like he had a set time, he had this routine, this ritual, this pattern. And that was what he attributed to, you know, success of thought and mind and the creativity that he brought. And obviously we know this name, right? Benjamin Franklin and all of his accolades. Not that I really want to know if you sit outside naked for 30 minutes a day, but I mean, is there anything that's like a physical activity that you do that's very deliberate or a ritual that you partake in that gives that to you?
Before I texted you, I was actually naked outside of your, sitting in the sun. So how did you, and I never heard that.
I'm just clairvoyant.
Vitamin D, I had to get vitamin D.
Gotcha.
You know, I think that I've heard a lot of those, about a lot of those things, and I think exercise is really great. Meditation, which is creating space. For some people, it's taking walks. For others, it's working on their car. I mean, whatever gets you into a very present mode where you're actually so focused and involved in what you're doing that you forget about everything else. If we could just do that, so that's those three things. If I did that, then I could manifest that. And to put into perspective, like I'll use my example with my kids, which I'm starting to realize is there was a New York Times article written about this, and from what I remember, the message was, you don't own your kids. They are not your possessions. And what resonated with me was the realization that I think dating back to whatever, the 1500s, right? I think farmers and people that made a living had kids because they used them to farm the land. It was an asset that yielded more production.
Right.
Yes, it was to have, you know, but I don't know, like maybe over time, our belief is that like we own the kids. We actually don't own the kids. And the more that I treat them as possessions, the more I control them, the more that I want to make them a certain way because I know better, you know? But I found also, and I'm thinking through this, so it's just it's an idea that even within Asian culture versus American culture, I think in Asian culture, we see American culture as much more free. They they're a lot more independent. So something as simple as in Taiwan, in Asia, families and kids live with their parents for much, much longer. And like Americans are like, can you leave at 12? If you're independent, get the fuck out of here. Like make your own living. Or we use words like, this is my house, and if you want to live in it, you live by my rules until you can make money, aka independent, whatever. So it's interesting to look at cultures like that too, and sort of this idea that our kids are our possessions, but the fact is they're not. And if we're not seeing them as possessions, then we should be more like Yoda in that we're coaching them. No different, I should have conversations with them like you, that I have with you, not as my possessions and I have to teach them this lesson or whatever. It's like we are coaches and we're mentors,
right?
But they are their own person.
Right.
They own themselves, you know? And then like what possibilities there are in that quality of relationship that you can develop with your kid as early as whatever, like 2 or 3,
right?
That paves the path to what they believe and how they interact with you, right? So the sense of control, whether with the kids or even with the business, that I own this business, yes, there's a structure and a financial, but you know, when it blends too much into your identity, that you own it so much that it becomes your identity, I think there's some challenges with that you know some people face, you know,
right.
that I've faced. So it's kind of an interesting idea.
Well, and I think I've seen you kind of be intentional about your actions, specifically to your kids and your family. And I guess I'll kind of not that I can't have an opinion on children, but not having them, I do realize like I don't quite have a reality grasp on all the nuances of that. But I think you've struck me as you take time for the kids, and like when you're gonna, you've made a plan to do something with the family, you kind of tune out from everything else. Like, hey, I'm gone for the weekend, like gone. I've always appreciated that you've done that, and I think that makes it easier, or that could be a tool. And again, this is just a basic communication thing. We're so busy. And you watch parents, and I understand, like life is crazy, especially here in Southern California. Like there's all this opportunity for all this activity, and I just watch people like barely hanging on. And of course, there's no time to dissect who your children are. Right. They are just this thing that you got to get to practice, and then you got to get them over here, and then there's a birthday party this weekend, and oh gosh, we have to go shopping still, we have to eat dinner, we have to, all of these things. And I see benefits to you slowing down and just focusing on the family. Now you may think, well, I've got a business call that's more important than my 4-year-old, but it's like, this is your 4-year-old. Right. That is shaping their identity right now and who they are going to be as a member of society. And I think I'm not a parent, but I think there isn't a greater role in that. Yeah. And I guess commend parents. Like if you can just be a little more mindful with that, I think like some of those relationships would they would take hold with your children. Because I do think, and one of the themes like moving forward, just as a society, I think I am concerned about the next generation and how things that we see as, that's really scary, what's coming down, the pike as far as, I don't know how much this TikTok society, like, what does that look like in 20 years? Like, it could be really bad. It could be fine. I don't know. But, are we investing in our children so that they are individuals and strong, that have a mindset that can withstand something that is going to challenge them? And I guess just leaving kind of your mark on that next generation, it's great to be successful in business. It's great to be successful with what's the here and now, but that next generation, I think, is just, I don't know. I almost want to have kids for that reason.
I mean, the cool thing is that it doesn't just apply to kids. It's like you talked about creating space. I mean, that could be for the spouse.
Absolutely.
And we talked about well, first I'll acknowledge, and I'm grateful that you see that, that I've made time, and I do try. And I think being present is something that we are learning that is very powerful, which the narrative that I had before in my own head was that taking time for yourself is being selfish. And so whether I got that from just Asian culture or my parents or society, I haven't thought that deep, but the fact is I've had it. But I've also seen when you create space for yourself, whether if you're a parent, and the space you need for yourself from everything else, or the space you need together with your spouse or the kids, like you pointed out, it's undervalued, I think, in our mindsets by default. And I've seen some really great things come out of my life by taking time to process things, and slowing down. So, but it is hard.
And I think it takes practice. I think it's going to be really uncomfortable. Like there is no like, okay, I'm going to do this today, and this weekend I'm not going to work, whatever it is. Like that's not going to be easy.
Nothing that you want to see as a result is easy. I mean, it's another example I've heard, which is awesome, is like cross your arms. Okay, so cross them again the other way. There. How hard is it to change and do something new, right? And how many times do you have to practice that, right? It's crazy because the brain is a machine. And I allude to this to my team, which is The Matrix, the movie. It's like we're all plugged in. It's not bad. It's just we're plugged in, and we've gotten all this like taught to us, like what's right, what's wrong, and to unwind some of those because you want a different result is not easy. Right. And I think for me, something very vulnerable would be, I think growing up, not my parents necessarily, but I was taught that when kids act out, AKA, 4, 5, 6-year-old is like just screaming and yelling and being disrespectful or even that. I've learned that being disrespectful to elders and people is not okay. And so what I was taught is what you do to kids like that is you shut them down, right? You teach that they have to respect either the situation because we're at a library and they can't be running around screaming and whatever. So, I'm more physical with my kids, and it took literally the first kind of like coaching I've gotten about even looking introspective about why I even feel this way, like embarrassed of my kids or that they're being disrespectful and they need to be a certain way, was 15 years ago. And up until now, I'm still getting a lot of coaching about that. And it wasn't until probably 2 weeks ago that I could not only know that I'm doing something, about to do something, or feeling this emotion, but naming it and then actually doing something about it in the moment. But it took me like so many years to even change that behavior of mine, where I was not as forceful with the kids, and to catch myself and go backwards, which is, I'm not gonna do it this way because this is not gonna serve any purpose.
We have pathways in our brain for neural pathways that are that is just what you do. But it does take acknowledging what you're doing, seeing it, and then and it's going to be time and time again, but having to take that very deliberate effort to change that.
Yeah, it takes courage. It takes what you said, which is the willingness to go somewhere where you don't understand and it feels very not good. It takes purpose, because a lot of times when people are courageous, it's because they feel a strong purpose. Sometimes with the kids, it's, I want to give them this experience that I had. And it causes me stress, and lately
you have to create
this experience that meant something to you, but really doesn't mean something to them. And what I've realized is I spend all my time trying to create this experience for them. But honestly, like, it's for me. It's not for them. It is for them, but the experience itself and exactly how I want to do it was actually for me. And when those aren't met, I take it out on them. And it's like, wow, this is really fucked up. Like, why the fuck are we doing all this shit,
It's funny how much of when your mindset is so locked into that neural pathway that wants to do things, any activity is going to look, it has to be this way because I'm going to control and we're going to have a great time while we do it, whether we like it or not, kind of a thing. Whereas having to adjust that mindset to not having expectations. And I relate like 100%, because that control freak in me just wants to control everything. I think that, and I'm not to overstate what we do in the off-road, overlanding, what all these things that like just, I think it's just getting out into nature. I don't care how you do it. Like, just get out and unplug, all of these things that I think are kind of a thread through everything we've said. I think the beauty of the off-road space is it challenges us. It puts us in positions that we're not familiar with. It forces us to be present. I mean, gosh, someone like shears off a hub, like, we're stopping, and we're in the present moment, like that.
And to that point, it's to connect.
Absolutely.
Sometimes with ourselves, but also, I see stories all the time where new people meet each other and they connect because someone's in need, in dire need to some of the things I've seen. And they never would have otherwise met, like two very different humans, and that's very powerful too, I think, in terms of camping and outdoor community, in the sense of coming together to be outdoors and then meeting new people and creating multiple communities and sense of belonging, security, and all that, which I know we talked about balance, in life and stuff. So what's your take on sort of a balance of all this? Because you're very busy, right?
This year is probably not a good year to ask me that. No.
Let's wait till next year.
No, I think it's tough. Like, this year, there's been a lot of opportunity that's been brought my way. So I want to take advantage of that. But in turn, that has made me very busy. And while there are seasons for everything, and I am totally willing to have those seasons, I do think, I think having to even be present in the challenges is still important. I don't know if the balance is there right now, to be completely honest. But I am legitimately okay with being a little off balance right now, which is a new thing. For sure.
Sounds like also that might be the New Balance.
And
that's not a plug for New Balance shoes, but that's the New Balance that you have.
They should hire you. They really should. Marketing. But again, maybe back to that growth, getting older, seeing things differently. I think you're okay with not being okay. Whereas before I'd just be like, oh my gosh, everything's out of control. I don't know what I'm doing, and all these, again, highly emotive things that I like to feel.
Right.
Yeah, there's just with the maturity of just life. It's like I'm okay with sitting in this for a while and seeing how this goes, and also wanting to pursue things. Because I mean, there's no challenges and strains and opportunities are stressful.
Right.
They're going to pull and create new normals for you and new ways to balance. So I feel like I'm in a transition phase right now. I'm still traveling a lot, so you still see a lot of that, but it's kind of in a different mode. And
honestly, I see you, all three of you guys, doing more squirt gunning than I see you being, really outdoors. And that's a new movement, I think, that you guys.
Well, honestly, that has been derived. That's come from. I love our community, and I'm not bad mouthing them at all. But we've gotten a little too serious in a lot of ways, and I think that's caused a lot of strain.
Sorry, I actually think this movement you've created is actually quite serious. So. I mean,
we can talk about that.
It is.
Our squirt guns, really?
We now have Nerf guns at work now. I think because of you, Lizzie, and Stacy.
I'll take that.
We need to actually start mounting them to our vehicles, because there is a fear of missing out here. And the one up would be you guys have water, and I think ours will have projectiles. And
all right.
we
can match that. We can figure this out.
To figure that out.
But at its core, I think what we do is fun. Like getting outdoors and spending time, whether it's, grabbing a beer, hanging out around the fire and just communicating with your buddies, or if it's, doing something that just scares the living crap out of you, but like that elation that you feel at the other end of that trail when it's like, we didn't die today. Like I felt like we were going, to me, that's all joy and fun and really the reason we go out at its core. And sometimes I see division and conflict and things that there's no place for that here. I know why it is here. We're human, that's what we do. But really the catalyst for the squirt guns, the water balloons, and us just being silly is we just want to have fun. And instead of hiding that we're silly, but we don't put that on camera, or we wouldn't put that on our truck, it's like, no, this is literally who we are. And let's have fun together.
Right.
Join us in this. Yeah. This isn't an exclusive thing.
I love that.
Break loose. Don't worry about what people, again, in a society where we're so worried about what everyone thinks about us, it's like, we're all silly. We're all pretty weird, honestly. Right. But we don't put that out there. It's like, I don't know, let your freak flag fly is what they say. Maybe that means something else. I mean it in a very wholesome way. But just go with it. We're silly people. Yeah. And I think that's a huge part of just the enjoyment of what we do. And so I think the three of us have just decided to hold on to that, and we're like, we're going to own it.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, we call them fundamentals at KC, which for some companies it's their core value. Our core value is still quality of relationship drives results, and it's built on how high of trust you have for each other, respect, and how well and highly you can communicate with each other. But to your point about getting out and taking steps to do that, it's like everything begins with habits, right? And so we call them fundamentals, which was given to us by a company called CultureWise. And what they believed is that if you create a series of truly defined things that you can truly, tangibly tell someone what it means. So one of them is laugh every day, because laughter does a lot for the human, And I think what you just described is that in an environment where you have different cliques and this, that, and there's some things happening, when you bring laughter and joy to a situation and look at that side of it versus this other side, which needs to be dealt with, but the fact is it's just shifting our mindset about the belief about, in the moment, how do you want to look at this, Glass half empty or glass half full type of thing. So I think that's really important,
Right.
Maybe it's diffusing the situation within a family or even within a company. It's like laughter and having fun is important. Yeah. Because if you don't do that, then it's going to be hard to move forward.
Right. Well, we just take ourselves too seriously. And I think that leads to just so many, you disconnect from people, you're in your head, you're not thinking about your fellow campmates, friends, family, whatever it is. I think it's about I don't know. And we can improve other people's experience too. Like, and I see you doing that, where you're concerned about the other people outside of yourself. And I know that takes work and thought, and we have, because we want to internalize, but going outside of yourself, like all those things, being an influencer in the community, like, dude, if we influence people to like have squirt guns, Nerf guns, water balloons, to laugh more, like, I'm good with that being my job.
Right. Well, I think that's you guys doing your best to lead by example, right? I mean,
yeah. We're trying. But yeah, we are. And again, social media is weird. It's like, you're taking this role of an influencer, and it's like, well, this is odd. I don't want to influence people. I just want to live. Mm-hmm. But we do that. We influence each other. We just now have the internet.
Right.
And all those tools. So influence is still and can be a good thing. And I think it's just taking ownership of that influence and what do we want that to look, and be mindful of it. Don't just go, well, I'm influencing people and we'll see how that goes. It's like, no, there's some responsibility for that as well.
Yeah.
And we have a finite time here on this earth. Like, let's make it count.
Yeah. Well, I think that goes back to make it count. A lot of times what I heard you say is, balance really changes. Because it comes back to like what are our expectations of ourselves and of what's around us that we can or cannot control. But you went from being kind of not okay with maybe being too busy in one aspect to now being okay with it, because your beliefs have shifted about what your priorities are, what you want in life, right? And so I think that's great. That's something that I want to do, which is keep this idea of balance. And I encourage everyone to think about that, is like, I think the goal of keeping your life in balance, it doesn't exist, and we will die trying, But what about the idea that the idea we have about balance could shift? If something's bothering us about like the balance that we have or don't have or whatever, we'll just ask ourselves, like you have, like, well, what's important to me, and shift the balance. Kind of like with the kids, it's like if I'm creating this experience for myself, but I'm really saying it and doing it for them, I'm kind of out of authenticity with like what's really going on internally. Right. And so I've been trying to not create balance, but just be more authentic with what balance means to me. And it's okay that changes day to day, week to week, or month to month. I think it comes back to our own expectations sometimes of what we want and where we want to go and what's important. And that's okay for it to change. Right. So that's kind of interesting to think about that way, that you went from this kind of balance to this kind of balance. Well, what really changed?
Right. So. Being allowed to change, I think, is so important too in a society, and not to get too trendy, but like you make a mistake and we just completely like, you're done. You're no longer valid. Like you've made a mistake and we're just, you don't exist. I guess a principle someone explained to me is like with politics, there's one side and then there's another. And we can argue all day and then we go to our respective corners and we argue and like, oh, that side's terrible. And well, there's no conclusion. We're not going anywhere. So if I'm really aggressive, maybe they'll be convinced. No, like we said, you can't come at someone and force change with them. What we do is we have to create a space for them on our side. Now, it doesn't mean they have to come to our side, but I create a spot for them to come to the conclusion that you would like them to come to. If you're not being mindful with giving them that space, they're never going to want to be on your side, because you're an awful person and you yell at me, and why would this, I don't want to be in that environment. So like and I've said it, like there's always I don't care what you believe, there's always a space for you at my fire.
Right.
And I think if we could adapt or adopt that as a culture, I think that would fix so many problems. Yeah. If we had that space where we can come together, we don't have to agree, but we can just come to that communal fire. And again, these are all principles. Again, the off-road space just kind of brings this stuff. There's a picture for it. We have these campfires. We love that. There's always a spot for you at my fire.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And I think one of the fond memories I have of you and of a lot of people that have helped KC be the new KC of today is this kind of shared idea or vision that Ali and we had about summer camp, right? And, I think back to like my why was, I remember summer camp, and it was just fear, anxiety of, whatever things they had for us to do. Like, I didn't want to do any of it, and I didn't want to meet anyone. And, I also wanted to just not stay there and go home. But you know, if you put yourself out there and you actually experience it, A, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was, and B, everyone's probably in the same boat. You know, some people are more confident and more maybe whatever, but we came out of it like with much more understanding and relationships that I don't know that would be very natural to have normally because of the natural mental structures that we have about other people, but also societal structures that we have.
Right.
Whether you're a rock crawler or an overlander or an off-roader or you know, just a Asian adventure correspondent from China, like whatever. I mean, like, you know, we bonded and that was really beautiful, you know.
That family has persisted for years now.
Yeah.
That family that was created on that weekend of coming together, so many different individuals. I don't even know, I mean, I think we would all agree that first day, I don't think all of us even liked each other that first day.
Probably not. Yeah.
So, I mean, it was like, ooh, this is gonna be an interesting weekend. We'll see how this goes. But I know that campfire, that final night we had together, that was profound in what people shared around that circle. And that is really the core of the KC family from my perspective. What you've done, that culture that was important to you, that you know, tried and then did implement, it has bled into us as the influencers and the marketers that work with your company. I don't know, that's really powerful. That's been a huge influence to me. So I guess, thank you. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you for sharing in this experience and this journey. You know, it takes two, and it always takes two. And I think, yeah, I mean, coming from that experience, it just like anything is possible, you know? And like you said, if we create the space, I'm gonna allude to Star Wars again. I mean, Darth Vader, right? While he was dying.
He's making everybody happy, it's okay.
While he was dying, he came back to, right, the Jedi side, and you never know when.
Right.
But you can't force it, nor can you change Vader until he's ready to change.
Right.
And it's never beautiful. It's not always beautiful, but the times that it happens, whether if it's father to son, father to daughter, mother to son, or friend to friend, like, yeah, consistently show up with the space available.
Right.
You know, show up kindly and show up authentically, hold up a mirror, be truthful, but like, don't close that door.
Right.
Don't remove that space, you know? I think that's the best version that we can be.
Absolutely.
And every day will be inconsistent, but we will keep trying to be consistent.
Right. Till the day we die. There's never perfection.
And I think off-road and, you know, adventures and all that those are mechanisms and channels that we can use to do those things, to foster a sense of community, understand ourselves, and empower others, you know, to move into our space. So.
Right. No. On that, I think that was great. Again, thank you for being here. I did not have any plans for this conversation, and I love where this. I could have sat here all day. We could sit here all day.
We could.
But thank you so much for being here. And if you'd like to follow along on Alan's journey, adventures, challenges with the kids, camping, the whole thing, I knew you're going to make me say this out loud. You can follow him on Instagram at OneBigWang. I'm gonna get you back for that. Yeah, again, just thanks for being here. Thank you for taking the time. It really does mean a lot. And I think we're gonna have to do this one again.
Anytime.
All right, thanks.